So there was a famous philosopher that once said, just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And that was Dory from Finding Nemo. So how do we actually keep swimming when it comes to youth ministry? And today's video, we're going to be talking about the top 3 reasons after I polled over 100 youth leaders that they say causes burnout and how to avoid them. So stay tuned. If you are new here, let me introduce myself. My name is Keith Seymour, and I started YouthMenWins.com to help address the systemic issue of burnout among youth leaders, the high turnover rate. It's no big surprise that over 46% of youth leaders turn over in the first 2 years of ministry. So they resign, they move on, they quit, whatever, burnout, moral failure. And so we started YouthMenWins.com to address that issue. So we provide practical coaching and training and online resources so that you can succeed in long haul youth ministry. So if that's something that interests you, consider subscribing to our channel here, ringing that alert bell so that you won't miss another video. We've also worked with a counselor to develop a burnout assessment guide. And so maybe you clicked on this video because you are there. You have been where I've been, 13 and a half years of youth ministry in one context, a church in Northern Virginia here where I live. And there were many times over those years where I felt like throwing in the towel. I felt burned out and I didn't know what was up, what was down. And so this burnout assessment that we've worked with counselors to do is a 38 question quiz that will help you determine how bad burnout is in your context right now. I feel like in some ways, it's not a matter of if we're experiencing a level of burnout, it's sometimes just how badly it is. So we walk through spiritual questions and physical symptom questions and emotional health questions that will help you give a percentage score on how burnout you are and what to do next as a result. So you can check out that burnout assessment at youthmenwins.com/burnout, and there'll be a link down in the description as well. So let's get started with our topic today, where I actually have noticed over the years that there's a high percentage of youth leaders, again I mentioned 46%, that have reported that they have transitioned within the first 2 years of starting a youth ministry position. And we all know that there's probably many various different reasons for that. And so as I've been sharing my heart with youth leader veterans and other youth leaders that are in the trenches right now about Youth Men Wins and my heart to address this issue, I got to sit down and ask a really important question to many people. Maybe some of you guys that are watching here is, what causes burnout in youth ministry? And so I got a myriad of responses from anywhere. Let me read some of them here too. From anywhere from lack of delegation to not having enough training, to lack of organization, micromanagement from senior leadership. But here are the 3 categories that kind of popped out from a lot of the answers as I talked with many people. The top 3 most common categories of answers are these 3, and I'll unpack these and how we can avoid falling into these pitfalls. Number 1 is ineffective ministry. So deep down, I really feel like many youth leaders are wrestling with that kind of question in their brains are, if I'm sacrificing this much, if I'm actually doing all this work, is it really making a difference? Is it actually impacting students? And we've all been there where we say, well, even if it just impacts one student, then it was all worth it. And I think that is a great mentality to have when it comes to the brevity of the work that we do, that we are not in it for the money, we're not in it for the fame. A lot of it is work that's not ever seen by other people, but the Lord knows and the Lord sees it. And so what I noticed in this aspect is that deep down they don't believe that they're making a tremendous difference in the lives of the students. And I've been there so many times. We've all had the discouraging drive home from youth group on Wednesday night or Sunday night or whenever your youth group meets, where you're thinking, man, did I do enough? Did I say the right things? Did I focus on the right things? Did I prepare enough? Or I know I didn't prepare enough. Did it actually make a difference in the lives of students? All I heard was some complaining from parents or leaders or students about what we did. and we've all mentally wrote the resignation in our minds, resignation letter on the way back from what could have been an effective ministry program, but we didn't really feel like it went as well as it could. So the second category is lack of spiritual health. So lack of spiritual health is a crucial element, and this is in essence what burnout can mean. It mainly means that you're expending more energy than you're receiving yourself, and so it's like running out of gas. So you're burning more gas than you have put in your tank, and so this is not surprising to me, the lack of spiritual health. I see a lot of youth leaders have what's called the starving baker syndrome. So they are feeding other people, but they're not eating themselves. And so they may have, you may have heard of that syndrome before, but when you focus more on feeding others and neglecting nourishing yourself, the idea is that that's not sustainable. It might be for a season, but not long term. And so it's when you fly the flight safety protocol, it tells you to put the mask on yourself before you put the mask on anyone else around you. And I think that's a valid point, that we need to care for ourselves spiritually before we're caring for other people, or as we're caring for people spiritually as well. The third category is loneliness. So many youth leaders that I've talked with find it hard to have genuine relationships or accountability in their regular day-to-day, week-to-week lives, and that's not uncommon for many ministry positions. So when you have different ministry positions that they feel like they can't, like senior pastor for instance, they can't be genuine and honest with people that they lead, because there's this unwritten rule or expectation that they don't struggle with anything. They don't actually have any real struggles because they're a professional Christian. They're a pastor. And so youth pastors and youth ministers and youth leaders, I've noticed, have kind of that dichotomy going on where they feel like they can't be genuine and share struggles and have that camaraderie with people that they lead, like in, as far as the teenagers. But then also commonly there's a chasm between the youth leader and the senior leadership, or even the parents that might be or have oversight over the youth ministry or over the youth leader. And so in between those, what I found is so effective is to have a youth ministry network of other like-minded youth leaders that are in the trenches with you, that are kind of horizontal relationships rather than the vertical relationship of people above you or people below you when it comes to those you serve or those you have to answer for or have accountability towards. And so with that in mind, the loneliness really plays in with the youth leaders, and it impacts the burnout aspect of ministry. So the question is, now that we know kind of the top three categories, one, let me know in the comments if any of those were surprising to you. So say which one was surprising to you. I'd love to know. And if none of them were, pick one that resonates with you. Maybe you've been there before. So the part that I want to focus on now is, okay, so we understand some of the top three answers that youth leaders are saying, what causes burnout. So I'm curious is how to avoid those things, and so I'm a big advocate of if it's predictable, then it's preventable. And so if it's predictable, then we know that we can prevent it. And burnout seems to be predictable when it comes to the high turnover rate of youth leaders in our country and in the Western Christian church. And so when it comes to ineffective ministry, what I found has been a life changer, just a complete game changer in youth ministry was when I did my master's thesis, my applied research project at seminary on teenage evangelism, and it was answering the question of why do we have so many resources? Why do we have people that are trained in youth ministry now? Why do we have access to the Bible in America, but we're not seeing the potential of revival that we can see happen, that we know that the Lord can do among teenagers in our areas and in our nation? And so through that, I got to see some raw research that Dare to Share, which many of you may be familiar with Dare to Share and Greg Steer's ministry in Denver, Colorado. And they've historically done conferences where they teach teenagers how to share their faith. And they did an extensive research project several years ago where they basically started to see how effective youth ministry was happening, where how do you measure success and how do you grow in youth ministry, rather than just attracting students that may not be committed followers of Christ. So how can you actually lead students to the Lord and see them make disciples who make disciples? And it was through that I read the book Gospelized. It had just come out, and it's by Greg Stier, the founder of Dare to Share. And so Greg wrote this book, Gospelized, based on that research project that they did. And what popped out of the research was that ministries that were doing really well, meaning that they had over 25% new conversion growth, which I'm going to talk about in just a second what that means. They were just killing it when it came to reaching the lost in their community of teenagers and discipling them in their youth ministry. And so they looked at the common denominators that these ministries had, and what they had were, even if they weren't written down or verbalized, they had 7 values, what they call gospel advancing ministry values. And these gospel advancing ministry values were a tremendous game changer for me in my ministry, because it's not about just anointing programs. We believe that God anoints people and not programs. And so how can we answer that question of how to reach students more effectively? What can we do to measure specific results? And so the gospel advancing ministry values were kind of a template that I just laid on our ministry and just oozed the values into everything that we did. One of those values is that ongoing programs reflect it. Another one is that we measure success through biblical metrics. And this kind of puts into perspective the ineffectiveness in ministry that people feel. How can you objectively kind of gauge if you're successful in ministry? Now, we all know that the Lord determines the results. So we're not saying that we're manufacturing results here. It's just a way to measure success and to see any progress that we have. And so we did this in our context by polling the students on a anonymous survey, where we actually had the 4-chair discipleship model. So that was our discipleship strategy from Sun Life Ministries. And so we used the 4-chair discipleship, where chair 1 was non-believer, chair 2 was believer but kind of inactive in their faith, chair 2 is worker, so they might be serving in some capacity, but they're not quite at chair 4, which is disciple maker. And so we anonymously polled our students every quarter to see if we had a progress or shift or change. It's almost like getting a spiritual. When you go to the doctor, you get a physical. So we gave students a spiritual where they evaluated where they were in that process of, are they not even a believer? Are they inactive in their faith, but they would claim that they're a believer? And are they serving in some capacity, or are they disciple making? And so by measuring that, they say that you are what you measure. And so we distinctively started measuring things like this in our ministry, so that we can kind of see warning signs or trends that we can go through or see that might be alarming, to where if we saw something go down or dip that was negative, then we would know that something needs to change as a result. So one of the things that we measured was new conversion growth. New conversion growth is when you measure how many students actually have come to Christ as a result of your ministry, not because the church on the street closed or because they moved to the area, which are not bad things if you have new families or new students that come to your ministry. But we want to know if we're being effective in actually leading other students to the Lord. And so one of the ways that you can measure that is through new conversion growth. Another way, as I mentioned, it was through that discipleship strategy. How many students are progressing in that chair? We had a chair a year goal where we asked students to try to move up a chair. In other words, like to become a disciple maker in the ministry, where they're investing spiritually into other people, leading other people to the Lord, they're discipling them. And that's one of the ways that we measure success. We also measure success through gospel conversations. So how many students are actively sharing the gospel regularly? How many students are serving in other areas of the church or in the youth ministry, whether it's like a greeter on a Sunday morning or in the kids ministry. We track those metrics because we believe that those things are important to show the life of our ministry. So maybe that's you, and you feel like you have you don't see any progress. Or I've even seen youth leaders when I say, how did your youth ministry grow this week? And they've said, well, there was a lot of energy in the room. And I'm like, how do you measure that? Like, how do you even like gauge to see if that's positive or good? Or they measure it, typically by how many students attend. And attendance is great. We have a whole book on numbers, right, where they counted people. And we don't want to neglect that, because each number is a person. But when it comes to just attendance alone, we know that we can give away a free iPad and attract a big crowd. But is that really effective ministry? We want to make sure that we are using metrics that actually matter in light of eternity. So for the lack of spiritual health, this is one that I've wrestled with, just making sure that I'm taking care of myself spiritually so that I'm investing in other people well and long term. And there was a great podcast that I often go back to and refer to from Pastor John Piper. Many of you guys know him, and he was actually asked in his Ask Pastor John podcast from a youth pastor, what can I do to avoid burnout? And he had 8 answers because he's always very thorough. And so I'll just list them out here because I've often gone back and referred to. I'm going to also try to link the podcast, the manuscript down in the description as well. But here are his 8 bullet points for avoiding burnout from John Piper. So he says, love what you do. And he's talking about finding those wonderful aspects of your job that are really useful for the young people, that are really godly and that fit you, and give yourself to those. Now, it doesn't mean that we can avoid all the other stuff that needs to happen, but he said in his ministry, focusing on what he loved the most and doing those things regularly energized him to do the things that he didn't enjoy as much. Number 2, he recommends lingering with the Lord every day. And I love that word linger because it's not just a checkbox. It's not just reading or listening to the Bible only. It's lingering with the Lord, praying. Have a time, a place. Stay with the Lord and linger in his presence so that you can receive from him, so that you can invest in other people. It's not a performance or just a show when you get before the Lord and linger with him. It is just sitting in his presence and obeying him in that. Number 3 is simply asking the Lord for perseverance, asking to protect you from burnout. And it seems so simple, but he says that a lot of pastors don't do it. And I think he says he probably prayed Psalm 16:1 as much as anything, which is preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. And what I meant was, don't let me quit, is what he says. And so the perseverance and praying for that is huge. Number 4, he says to keep Sabbath. That is to keep one day in 7 to disengage. Go out to pasture. You're not a shepherd, you are a sheep, and sheep need food. You're not just a shepherd of these students. You are a sheep as well. And so go out to pasture, graze upon the Lord, disengage from ministry, and I know that can be so challenging. We're pulled in all different directions. But my challenge is to select one day of the week, and it may not even be the same day, but try to hold it and guard it with all your might if you're able to. Just that one day of rest and disengaging. Number 5, this ties into the physical aspect, which I personally benefited from this advice as well, is get exercise. And he says to hammer it 3 times a week. Beat your body, make it sweat, be exhausted, and it'll reap mental benefits. And there's something going on with that God knows about, and some psychiatrists know about, but very few people know, and it makes such a difference. And so the 6th thing that he recommends in his 8 bullet points on how to avoid burnout is to sleep 8 hours a night. Okay, all right, so I want you to do me a favor right now. If you got 8 hours of 8 hours of sleep last night, I want you to pat yourself on the back. But if you didn't get 8 hours of sleep last night, I want you to like this video just to show me that you are with me, because it is very rare for me to even get 8 hours of sleep a night. But yeah, for us, we need to be in that discipline of getting regular rest. And I love that he said things in different podcasts and things I've heard where he says like sleep is the ultimate equalizer when it comes to rest, right? I mean, the most high-performing athlete needs to still get sleep. The CEO of a company still needs to sleep like a baby every night. And it's God's way of just saying, you're not God. Get some sleep. And so getting sleep is a huge, crucial aspect. And then there's 2 more things. 1, have a couple of soul brothers or sisters that you love to hang out with, talk about everything with, and let them pray for you. And enjoy them. Just enjoy the fellowship of having other friends. And this is where I talked about getting plugged into a local youth leaders network. And it doesn't even have to be other youth leaders, but have some friends where you can be genuine with and open and honest with, and invest your time wisely in that. And then eighth and finally, John Piper's recommendations on how to avoid burnout when it comes to your spiritual health. He says to keep your eyes on Christ and his loving you and you making much of him. And it's so crucial. Don't let your eyes drift towards, I want to please other people in ministry. I want to make a name for myself so that other people will look at me more. When you start to think that way, you start shifting the whole focus off of Christ and onto yourself. And so those are John Piper's 8 ways to avoid spiritual burnout. And then finally, I wanted to talk about the third thing, where it's loneliness in ministry. So we talked about having a set of friends that you can invest in and regularly spend time with and pour into, and let them pour into you. But I highly recommend joining a local youth leaders network, and this has been a crucial element of my own success and endurance and perseverance in ministry, as well as many of other people that I've gotten feedback from in our youth leaders network. And so you can actually check out if there's a youth leaders network around you. If you're not part of one, you can actually go to youthworkers.net, where the National Network of Youth Ministries in NYM, they have local chapters of youth ministry networks where you can join in. And chances are, even if you're in a remote part of the country, chances are you might even find one within a drive from you. So this has proven to be a huge lifesaver in my own life and the youth leaders that I know in our area. And additionally, I wanted to highlight something that we're offering as well. So youth ministry, our youthmenwins.com, we're going to be having an online coaching community, and I'll put the link in below. But it'll be a way to learn and sharpen skills on an ongoing basis. You'll also have the support community and access to that, and it'll all be private. Host on a different platform other than social media, because I know I'm in several Facebook groups of youth ministry communities, and so this will be a completely different platform. And so if you're interested in joining us in that, it's a huge benefit to stay connected with other people and also to learn from people in different contexts of ministry around the country. You can take a look at the link in the description for that. And so there you have it. Those are the top 3 responses that I received when I asked the question, what causes burnout? And those 3 responses, how we handle that can make a huge difference in our longevity in ministry. And so I want to challenge you, if I missed any of them, and so maybe you were one of the ones that provided feedback, if I missed anything that you feel like is a key aspect of what causes burnout in youth ministry, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. But also, if you if one of these resonate with you, where you're like, oh my goodness, like this is something that I need to address in the urgent. So we're approaching a new year, and I'd love for you to get ahead of these things, where you actually have a plan on how to address one of these top 3, so that you're not finding yourself at the bottom of the cliff. We want to make sure that you're having those boundaries in place at the top of the cliff, the guardrail, rather than the hospital. And so I'd love to know in the comments which one resonated with you out of these top 3. So thank you guys so much for watching today, and we will see you next time.